All right, continuing. So in the last video, I got my sketch. So now we're on our fourth video here, and I'm making a decision about which one I want. And the one I want is going to be this upright version. And what I love about doing it in a sketchbook is that I can reference that without having to take up the computer screen to do it. But however you get your sketch, we need to get it into Canvas. So I'm going to save this. And I'm going to save it with my name, just because this is my sketch. This is assignment 2, Dodo sketch. I'm going to save it to the desktop so I can organize it into the right folder as a PSD file. Okay, now that I've got that, I can just save it as an online format. So save a copy with the name to the desktop as a JPEG. So I don't need it to take up more memory in order to be to support transparency, because there is no such transparency. It's a filled up rectangle. And now I can go to my post where I put kind of my inspiration idea. So my idea is a dodo porcupine, right? And your inspiration is not a requirement, but your sketch is a requirement, right? So requirement 1, skeletal template sketch. And if you're ever wondering what are the required things to post for a project, and you don't want to have to wait for me to tell you, you'll just see whenever I give you the past student example in the instructions, I'll show you all the required components. So a planning sketch, and then your final composite, just like we did for our landscape. If I post extra things than that, they are not required, they are optional. But it's to kind of just keep you aware of, remind you of our process. In digital art, that's called our workflow. Okay, next, I'm going to find on the desktop, function F11, the JPEG of my sketch. I like to mark those orange. Keeps it clear for me which ones are online formats, which ones are Photoshop formats. There were a few students where you forgot and you posted your Photoshop format for assignment 1, and that just takes a ton of memory and it will never show up, right? It will only ever attach. So you need to save as either a PNG or a JPEG of what we've learned so far to get it to show up. And then I shrink it so that it's, not huge. It goes well with my name. Okay, now the next step. Just like we did with the landscape, we have to prepare our pixel dimensions. So we use Photoshop in this class. I'm going to open up Photoshop. And I'm going to open up my sketch in Photoshop. Now, because I've chosen this one, I could crop down to just that one, because I have to pick the final printable format of it, right? So I'm going to use my crop tool. Remember, you can always use your guides if you want help with your crop tool. To use your guides, you use your move tool. And you click on the rulers. If you don't see the rulers, hit Command R. And you crop to the edges. And my sketch could be incredibly detailed, or my sketch could be incredibly simple, right? And it works either way. It shows me how things connect. In fact, I'm going to lessen this because that skeleton is the most helpful thing. Okay, now I am going to, because I drew it digitally, I am going to merge all of these by going to Layer, Flatten Image. So I'm just working on one sketch layer. And I'm going to change the name of this by going to File, Save As. And now this is not just going to be my assignment 2 sketch, this is going to be my assignment 2. And whenever you save as and change the name, it will make a new file. Okay. Now I've saved it with my name and a description for assignment 2. And in order to start compositing it at the desired output, which is at least 8 by 10 inches at least 300 pixels per inch, I am going to go to image size, and I'm going to grow my sketch to the desired resolution. So the first, I want to make sure that resample is checked. The second thing, I want to make sure that this chain link is connected, not disconnected, because that will keep the height and width in proportion to each other, so it doesn't distort. And I'm going to make the width here, let's make it 14. And my height's actually bigger than my width, so let's take that down. Let's make the width 11. Or maybe 10. So I want it to be at least 8 by 10. The problem is if I make the width 8, right, then it's less than 8 by 10. And if I make the width 10, then it's larger than 8 by 10. And if I want to go a little bit larger than that, because Photoshop's very powerful, and we're not limited by processing speed on these computers, I can go to 11. And yeah, I think that's fine. But that's just the physical inches. So we're intending to print these, right? That's the assignment. These need to be for print portfolio. So we need a higher resolution than 72. 72 is the standard minimum screen resolution for websites, for phone interfaces. What we need is something that is the standard minimum for printing, and that is what resolution? 300 pixels per inch. And then if I'm feeling like I really want to invest in this, I would actually do what I call my studio resolution, which is 350, which is just a little bit above standard, so that I can print it even bigger if I wanted to. Because maybe, if I like this idea, it's going to be a portfolio piece, and I might want to print it bigger than 8 by 10. Maybe even up to 16 by 20. All right. Now, I've got that sketch, and what did the computer do? Even though it was digitally made, it really softened everything, because we made the computer invent a lot of pixels, but I can still clearly tell what's there. Now what I want to do is give myself some space to bring in my reference images, just like we did before. So now I don't change the image size, instead I change the canvas size. So image, canvas size, and I'm going to use the largest printable size on a professional 4-color print, and that is 30 inches by 40 inches. So I'm going to say 30 inches wide, 40 inches tall. The extension color is going to be gray. All right, there we go. So now I've got my desired sketch taped onto my table with space around to work on it. As I bring in my reference, like I'll bring in the head first, because the head is the focal point of any creature design. And even before I bring in my head, I can do little things. Like I can open them up just by double-clicking in Preview, and then I can go to Tools, and I can flip horizontal, right? You can also do that with Transform in Photoshop. But if I do that, that might help me understand which ones do I actually want to bring in. Like, do I like that beak and that head position better? I like how it's kind of a fisheye lens there. Or do I like this beak and this head position better? So I get them all angled as close to my sketch as possible. So this is just like Free Transform, but this is using the Preview tool, which you just double-click on a JPEG to get, or any online image. It's also how you can convert web photos into other formats. So I'm going to actually flip this, because this is for the back of the head, to have this kind of stuff coming out of it. And then this is for the neck, so this needs to flip. So really, every single one of them needed to flip horizontally. And then what's my master reference? So usually I would say the cranium. Like, what cranium do I want to use? And I guess this would be the cranium. So that's that kind of fishbowl, right? And now immediately because it's not as expansive as landscape, it's more targeted, I can use my lasso tool, and with a lot of overlap, because we know we're going to have to transition these things into each other and blend them, I'm going to grab the portions of it which I think are helpful. Now, I'm not using this beak, but I'm going to use that cranium and use that eye at least as a focal point. So I circle around it with a lot of overlap, and then I hit Command J to cut it out, and then I delete the smart object. And then that automatically rasterizes it. I can see that that's really big, so I can do Command T, shrink it down a little bit, angle it a little bit to kind of match my sketch. But instead of putting it right on top to begin with, I'm going to move it off to the side a little bit. We're going to use a little bit more of this working space. So the analogy I use for this is less like collaging with magazines, like I use for assignment 1, and more like building a car in a factory. When you build a car in a factory, different components are built in different places. The head is like the engine of the car. It's the most important thing. You don't have a car without an engine, right? So we're going to spend more time putting together the parts of the head because it's the focal point. You can't have a character without a focal point, right? And then we're going to build the body, and then we're going to use the middle of the factory floor to kind of weld them all together. So we're starting the head. What's the next part of the head I want? Well, there's the beak. And I'm thinking I don't want something that's as recognizable as the pelican. That's not a pelican. Flamingo. And instead, I want this kind of really goofy beak. But I can see right away, I need to size that bigger. I need to tilt it. And I can do all of that while it's still a smart object. Then I hit return. And then I don't want all that wasted information. So I'm just going to grab this, again with a lot of overlap, and then Command J, and then delete that smart object. And then move it into place. I'm going to turn on Auto Select Layer for the moment. Right? So now already I'm starting to get a vision, right? Okay, next, what else do I need for that head? I was thinking this would be really helpful for the neck, the connection. This rooster. So it's still a smart object. So I want to size it while it's a smart object, right? And it's about the right size, but I'm going to hit Command T and just lengthen it a little bit. And then I'm going to lasso around it with a lot of overlap. And who knows, maybe some of that little red color will be helpful. But I want a lot of overlap here into the chest, because this is for the neck connecting with the rest of the body. In fact, I might even want these orange feathers. Who knows? They might be really helpful. Okay, then Command J, cut it out, delete the smart object, and move it in. And now move it underneath, right? Or maybe between. All right, so you see what I've got so far? Just really rough cut and placed. Now those are the main components of the head. I'll keep it as simple as that. And immediately, I'm going to select all three of those layers that make the head, and I'm going to put them into a layer group by clicking on the folder icon in the layer window. And I'm going to label that group very creatively, head. Now, what's nice about that is as a group, that allows me to move them all together. And it allows me to transform them all together. But they are not all together. They are still separate. So when I want to start blending them, for instance, I zoom in and I use my eraser at 100% opacity, soft edge, pretty large, exactly like I was using it in my landscape. And I get rid of the hard edges. to start blending